Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining our webinar today, Marketing Your Library, Raising the Profile of the Library in Student Workflows. We'll just give it a minute or so for just more people to join. So as we wait for people to join, feel free to share in the chat where in the world you're based and your library, so we can get to know each other a bit more. My name is Tara. I'm a Senior Marketing Executive at Technology from Sage. And thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar. Just give it another minute or so for more people to join. Oh, that's fantastic. Fantastic to see where you're based. We've got Oklahoma University. University of Manitoba and Glasgow School of Art. So all across the globe. Hey, fantastic. I think we can begin. So welcome to our webinar today, Marketing Your Library, Raising the Profile of the Library Student Workflows. So our speakers for today are Fiona, the Head of Brand Marketing at Technology from Sage. We're joined by Talia, Vice President of Marketing at SpringShare, and Robin, Associate Professor and Associate Director of University of Tennessee Press. So a little bit of housekeeping. So please check you can see and hear us. Let us know in the chat if there's any issues at all. We'll be recording this webinar and we'll send out the recording afterwards so you can share it with your colleagues. If you have any questions at all that you think of throughout the webinar, please do ask them in the Q&A box. And we've got 10 minutes at the end to answer the questions. So a quick look at the agenda. Fiona will take us through some context of the current digital landscape and online habits of current students, where we need to meet them to market the library. Talia will take us through the current student mindset and their need for library guidance, how LibGuides and LibChat can help achieve this. And then Robin will show us how some library marketing strategies used at the University of Tennessee Press. And then that will lead into a quick roundtable chat on the topic, and then we'll open the floor for some Q&A questions. So over to Fiona for the online habits of current students.
Thanks, Tara. Hi, everyone. So to provide some insight on the current habits of students and their understanding of the library, I'm going to pull some key stats from our Librarian Futures reports. So you can read these over at librarian-futures.com. These reports look at the changing relationship between librarians and patrons, what patrons need in today's digital landscape, and how librarians can meet those needs. These are key elements to consider when thinking about the best marketing tactics for your library. So today's digital landscape, this quote you've probably seen a lot before, it's a common one, but it asks, are librarians still relevant when you have so much information online? We feel the answer is very much yes, as I'm sure you all do too. With the current pace of change, patrons will need librarians and library guidance more than ever. However, it does mean that the future role of the librarian will be diverse. We have to consider the advent of Gen AI, the build-up of misinformation, the fact that many students are digital natives and no longer want to visit the library in the traditional ways. Confidence in the role of librarian, how important it is, and how the librarian can be a leader in the information and digital literacy space is essential. So as patron needs change, librarians face a challenge in both re-engaging with patrons in new spaces and re-engaging with the mission of the library and how to impactfully market the library to patrons in a way that resonates with them. Next slide, please, Tara. Thank you. So the first step in marketing, in my eyes, is understanding your audience and how you are viewed by them. So there's still a slightly old-fashioned view of libraries as physical spaces, as collections and books on shelves. So a key consideration in marketing your library needs to be on how to reframe the library to patrons and how to remind them that the library is there to help them with their current needs. So from our reports, we can see there's an apparent disconnect between what the library knows it does and what patrons think the library does. In our survey, only 33% of students considered the library's provision of resources as a major support to their academic needs. And in part 2 of our report, we also found that only 25% of students reported receiving help from librarians for accessing resources, and just 16% said that librarians had helped them find good information. So to me, this shows that patrons just don't fully understand just how many of the resources they use have been provided by the library or can be. And a striking finding for us was that students use the librarian as often as they use Wikipedia. But this does actually make sense when you think of students as digital natives. They are drawn to easy to use resources like Wikipedia that save them time. Next slide, please, Tara. Thank you. So with all this considered, how can we make the library more visible? We found that regardless of students not fully understanding library services all the time, they still highly appreciate their librarians. They are open to receiving communication, help and guidance from the library, and their responses suggest that they wouldn't be adverse to more library marketing. And of course, we want our marketing to be fruitful and not wasteful of resource and time. So by understanding how patrons want to hear from the library, we can ensure we are undertaking marketing activities that won't be wasted. And 60% of students would rather hear from the library when and where they need it. And 74% of students start their discovery process outside of the library. So finding them where they are is key. And that number one way to market to patrons that they'll actually notice is to meet them where they are in the workflow and provide those library comms where they need it. Next slide, please, Tara. So if we want to provide patrons with library guidance when and where they need it, we do need to understand their online habits, where they do their research, and inject the library into those places. In part 2 of our report, we found that part-time and mature students identified librarians as providing help significantly more than full-time students, and they are more likely to visit the library via traditional routes, showing we do need to market the library differently depending on patron demographic. But widespread patrons do overwhelmingly start their discovery on places like Google Scholar, Wikipedia, PubMed, and even ChatGPT. And with the advent of tools such as ChatGPT and GenAI, we're actually presented with more need for librarians to guide on ethical use, critical thinking, digital literacy. 46% of researchers said although they use AI, their distrust of it is high, and they need guidance from their institution. So an example of marketing that would combat this is using Lean Library and LibGuides to inject guidance to researchers on pages such as ChatGPT. And then Gen Z, who make up a large number of the student population now, will need a different approach from those mature students. They feel much more comfortable communicating online, showing a hesitancy for in-person library sessions and presentations, and more need for online library chat. And 98% of Gen Zers are on TikTok. So social media becomes a key platform on which to find students and get your messages across to them. So an example of marketing to a Gen Z student could be investing time in a library TikTok account or improving library chat services. So this is the first webinar that we've run in our library marketing series. And we will be running another one soon on social media tactics only. So the Gen Z conversation will become much more relevant then. But for now, I'll pass on to Talia to talk through student stress levels and amplifying library guidance in their workflow.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can see me okay. And that's me over there in the corner. I just a little bit of background about me. I do have a master's in library sciences, as well as a master's from uh, in communicate and commerce, a master's in commerce and business from the University of Auckland, New Zealand. And I worked for over 6 years as a librarian at Johnson and Wales University in Rhode Island. And I was the first to bring LibGuides and LibAnswers to the entire state of Rhode Island. And I joined SpringShare back in 2010. So I have been there, I've been here for 14 years now. Next slide. So I'm going to be talking to you I'm going to start this out by providing a little bit of context. So when we're talking about students and we're thinking about our users and our demographics of patrons that we service, we kind of tend to think of them in just in the lane of their research needs, right? How do the students need to use the library? How do faculty need to use the library? And we oftentimes don't think of the holistic student population or the holistic demographic of people that we are servicing and what they are bringing to their college experience. And we know that people don't segment themselves. They bring their whole self to work and to study. And so with that in mind, one of the things that I tend to look at every year is this annual report that's put out by the American Psychological Association. They do it every year. You can go back and look at previous years. And the report is called Stress in America. Unfortunately, this is an American focused report, United States of America focused report. There is no global report of stress in the world. So I know a lot of folks are coming at this from outside of the United States, but probably very similar comparisons can probably be made between, the reports here reporting in America and perhaps in your country as well. So in the 2023 report, they found that the 18 to 34-year-old demographic is the most stressed demographic in the entire United States, which if we're thinking of traditional students and even non-traditional students, that's your user base. And you can see that that percentage is up from 26% in 2019 up to 34% in 2023. So that is an 8% increase in stress, making them the most stressed group in the entire country. Next slide. But that's not all, there's more. So when we're talking about how this younger adults, this group of 18 to 34 demographic, what are the effects of stress? They're pretty significant. So if you're looking at each one of these charts, the stress levels have made them less patient for others. Most days their stress completely overwhelm them. They're so stressed they feel numb. They're so stressed they can't function. They're so stressed they can't bring themselves to do anything. They're so stressed it makes them hard to focus. You can see that 18 to 34% demographic overwhelmingly makes up the majority of each and every single one of those categories. So when you're talking about your student population and you're talking about, meeting the needs of students and marketing and getting in front of those students, you have to keep in mind that they're bringing to their educational experience a significant portion of them, probably well over 30% of them, are feeling like this. They're feeling so stressed, they can't function, they feel numb, they have less patience, and they feel completely overwhelmed. Next slide. And just recently, a couple of weeks ago, the Stress in America report got updated for 2024. And it was all focused on political unrest. We had just had our election yesterday in the United States. And one of the significant findings was that personal safety is a major source of stress. So if you are dealing with, if in your demographic of, population of students, you have any that identify as LGBTQIA+, or any that are Black adults, Latino adults, Asian adults, they are significantly feeling more stress than, say, other groups of students that are in your institution that you may be servicing. And once again, that age 18 to 34 demographic is the largest demographic by 10 percentage points that are feeling stress and are feeling personal safety and the safety of themselves, and perhaps even the safety of how they feel on your campus as a source of stress. Next slide. And it doesn't end there. They're feeling, of course, discrimination as a source of stress. So those who identify as LGBTQIA are 41% more likely to feel stress, discrimination as a source of stress, and then 41% for Black adults, 35% for Latino adults, 29% for Asian adults, and so on. So bottom line, when we're talking about the students that are coming to your campus, the ones that you are servicing, we tend to focus on how we can service them, their academic needs, but bearing in mind all of these levels of stress that they are feeling, so much that they feel numb, so much that they can't function, so much that their personal safety feels at risk. One must keep that in mind when we're talking about how do we get the library in front of them when and where they need it the most. Next slide. So another part of this, to compound it all, has to do with AI. There was a really great study put out by the University of Northampton focusing on, they have an AI special interest group, and they did a little research study. And very surprisingly, students have a lot of concerns about AI. They have ethical concerns. It does surprisingly have a low rate of adoption for students, which was, I found very, very surprising. They don't have the skills to use AI, and they have serious concerns about bias, accuracy. They're worried that it's going to diminish the value of their degree, that they're going to graduate and not have a job because AI is going to put them out of work. And it's a little bit skewed as to whether, if they've used it prior, they tend to have a little bit more of a positive outlook. If they had not used it prior, they're a little bit more concerned about their future opportunities. But when we kind of look at all of this, kind of holistically, the stress that they're bringing from their personal life, the stress that they may be feeling from the political landscape, the stress that they're feeling about the future of their, employment opportunities due to AI, I think bottom line, we can say that students are stressed and they're confused, right? And because of these two things, they really need and actually crave guidance. And are you, and when I say you, I don't mean you specifically, I mean you, the library, are you where they need you the most? And what was really interesting about this too, this study about AI, was when students actually want help, when they get to that point where they need help and they will talk to somebody, because we all know that is always like the break glass, case scenario. They would rather spend 7 hours searching on Google than talk to somebody and ask for help. That could save them 5 minutes. So when they get to that point where they actually can't figure it out on their own anymore and they want live help, they don't want to chat with AI. They want to chat with a real person, which I find really, really interesting. Next slide, Tara. So before I jump into kind of the second part, so we kind of are setting the stage here. We're talking a little bit about what's the student experience is like. I just have a question for all of you. We have roughly 80 folks in the webinar today. I'm just super curious. Are you using LibGuides at your library? Are you using LibAnswers with LibChat? And are you using Lean Library? And Tara, when we're ready, can I see the results on the screen? I don't think I can see them from this view. I'll give it another couple seconds for folks to vote. Hopefully you're voting. All right, can we see the results, Tara?
Hey Charlotte, I'm not 100% sure how to get it on this screen, but I can read out the results.
Oh, please
That's
do.
still
Go ahead.
helpful. Yeah, so are you using LibGuides at your library? We've got 76% of you saying yes, which is great. 25% say no.
Okay.
And then for are you using LibAnswers with LibChat? So for answering both, it's about 46%.
Okay.
And then just LibAnswers is 10%. LibChat is 5%. And then neither is 39%.
Okay.
And then we asked a question, do you use the library or institution? And we have 12% of you saying yes. And then we have 88% of you saying no. So that's really insightful results, and we'll make sure to share these.
Oh,
Yeah,
I can see it now.
Oh, brilliant.
There we go.
We can leave them on for another minute just so everyone can see them.
Thank you. And can we jump to the next slide? Thanks.
Of
So
course,
now
yeah.
that we've set the context of kind of what is the experience of your students and kind of what are they bringing to their studies, their, you know, their whole self complete with all of their stress. One of the things that I think libraries and perhaps academic libraries in particular tend to focus on is this concept of, you know, content is king. You know, this is from, I believe, a famous media publisher, and his motto was content is king. The most important thing is to have good content, interesting content. And libraries are kind of, you know, the originals, the OGs, if you will, of that concept. You know, we're always focusing on having great content in the library, accessible content, making sure we're building out LibGuides, making sure we've got all of the, you know, unembargoed access to articles and e-resources and ebooks and multimedia and events, you know, if we want to wrap that up into content. But one of the things, and I think academic libraries are missing out the second part of that phrase. The content is king, but distribution is queen, and she wears the pants. So you can have the best content in the world. You could have every ebook that has ever, every book that has ever been written in ebook format with unembargoed access and unlimited downloads for every user to ever exist. But if they don't know about it, if it isn't getting into their hands, if your distribution isn't there, then the content goes unused, and it is, you know, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound, right? Next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit next about how to get your content in front of users where they need it the most. And this is about the LibGuides and LibChat, really beautiful integration that we have with Lean Library. And this, of course, addresses the first part, which is that students are confused, they're overwhelmed, they don't know where to go, they need help, they need guidance, right? So streamlining that process of getting you in front of them and helping to kind of just maybe take a little bit of the stress off of their plate that they're already feeling. So the LibGuides and LibChat integration with Lean Library helps to streamline the delivery of those resources directly and puts it directly in front of the students using the Lean Library browser extension. So just quick, oh, go back. Yep, quick note there. We have roughly 950,000 published LibGuides from 200, almost 300,000 librarians across 5,800 institutions in 107 countries. That's 163 guides per institution. And this integration allows you to deploy a LibGuide, you know, natively in front of the user where they need it at point of need. So to give you an idea, the university, Utah State University, they launched a pilot program in 2021. They had a guide called Introduction to Google Scholar. And that guide launched every single time a student went to Google Scholar. So whenever they went to Google Scholar, the guide launched. And that in and of itself saw a 450% increase in views on that guide in just 2.5 months. Next slide. But that's not all. You can enjoy integration of the Lean Library features with chat. And on the right side of the screen, you can see that I'm on JSTOR. So I'm not even on the library website. I went to JSTOR and I found JSTOR by going to Google. So I didn't even go through the library website. And right from here, I can chat with a librarian. So imagine providing point of need assistance when they're not even on your library's website to ask for help, right? Next slide. And when we're talking about, chat and AI and chatbots, people get really confused. But if you haven't heard of it, we've just recently added a chatbot to LibAnswers. And I always say it's LI, librarian intelligence, not AI, artificial intelligence. It is no AI behind it. It's basically a series of if this, then that flows that can guide your users towards the answers. It's really, really great because if you want to be able to offer chat to your students, but you don't want to be on call 24 hours a day, because who can? You can offer, live chat, and then offer a chatbot when you're not, online to be able to answer them. Next slide. Okay, so to wrap it up, I forgot to put up a wrapping slide. When we're talking about, marketing to students and effectively marketing to students, we're talking about, understanding their mindset, understanding their holistic experience, understanding they need guidance, they need help, and cutting out that middleman and putting yourself kind of natively in their workflows as best as you can to assist them. Thanks.
All right. I'm Robin Biedenbow, and as noted at the beginning, I'm at the University of Tennessee, currently working with the University of Tennessee Press, which now, as in many institutions, reports up through the libraries at the University of Tennessee. And for about a decade, I was in charge of marketing and communication for the libraries. And what I want to go over is 3 key points, and Tali and Fiona have already sort of taken up the first one here, which is find out what your audience is reading or watching already, and be there. Don't be afraid to have some fun, and whatever you do, don't forget the assessment. So if we move on to our next slide, please. Finding your audience is, and I noticed in the chat, just like we are here at in Knoxville, Tennessee, not allowed to use TikTok on campus. So when 98% of Gen Z is on TikTok, it's kind of that's a challenge. But there are other things you can do. Newsletters, as you see an example of University of Tennessee News here. We worked really hard with not just the campus communication office, but with departmental communication people on campus to ensure that we were getting our content in newsletters they were already distributing. I don't know about you. I'm guessing, like me and a lot of our students, you're just sick of all the email coming in. So as much as you can manage not contributing to email exhaustion, I think the better off you're going to be. And let's move on to the next slide. One thing we did, being where your audience is only partly about place, and it's partly about what actually gets people's attention. And to get people's attention at the University of Tennessee, sports is one way to do it. We love basketball and football and baseball down here. I don't know if for those of you who do not know. So one thing we did was we took that and tried to use it to our advantage. So as you can see here, and we used subject librarians as sort of the focus of this. Here you can see who was at the time our engineering librarian, Janine Williamson. She was, so engineering is your game, information is mine. Animal science is your game, information is mine. And for me, I did not have a subject assignment at the time, so I went with information is my game. That's me there in the middle with my favorite shoes. And I used the picture of myself for a very important reason, not just because I want to show off those shoes, but to say, don't be sure you're not asking your colleagues to do things you wouldn't do yourself. That's part of the having fun, is making sure that whatever you're doing is something that everybody will enjoy. let us, and these were actually cards we made that we passed out, that were given to librarians that they could pass out, and we kept them near our reference desk so that anybody who happened to be working the desk could give this card to students or faculty that came to the desk. And there were bios on the back and information about these librarians' particular subject areas. Thank you for the compliment on the shoes. All right, let us move on to the next slide. As part of this, we actually did some videos as well. And at the time, we also had what was called Residence Life Cinema, which was a streaming service that was available only on campus. And it was available to all students, faculty, staff. And since the library was running it, we had this huge advantage in that what we could do before people started watching Batman or whatever movie it is they wanted to watch, we could run commercials ahead of those movies. So that gave us a little bit of a captive audience. As you can see here, Chris Derman, our music librarian, we did a little video with him, and Terry Bowman, who is a local kickboxing instructor. And it was a really funny thing. You should check it out on UTK Libraries on YouTube. I've got another one I'll show you in a minute, but Chris was super excited about this. Chris is also a musician. And we were, thank you for the question. We were posting these on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, like on all of our social media as well. And Chris, though, was super excited because people were seeing this video. What we found out was people seeing it mostly on Residence Life Cinema. And Chris started getting recognized on campus, like, people that didn't know him before. And he's played in several bands throughout his life, and actually said to me one day he had never felt more like a rock star, because people would be like, "Oh, hey, you're that guy that was in that boxing video." So let's move on to the next slide. At the end of this, the videos were sort of centered around librarians being kind of bad at sports, but good at information, right? So what we did at the end was we've created this video giving librarians a chance to say, hey, some of us are actually a little sporty too. Tara, if you could play this, please. All right, thank you. And yeah, that actually got a lot of great reception on campus as well. People getting, and of course, all of my librarian friends absolutely love it because, well, we're all awesome. We know this. So another thing we did, and we did before we, TikTok basically got banned on campus. We did have it for a little while, and during the pandemic, we decided, okay, we need to make sure we can point people at resources, particularly because a lot of them weren't coming into the library, and for a while, the library was just closed. And another point I'll say is don't underestimate the talent of your colleagues, because I would have never guessed someone would come up with a really, really great rap about Hati Trust, but I was wrong. So Tara, if you could play this, please.
No books, we got your ebooks. Read them online when you need books. From our homepage, search it, one search. Format books, electronic, then apply. But if you're having trouble, can't find the book, articles and databases where to look. All you have to do is search by type and find a database you feel is hype. Now, Hati Trust, worth your time. Then you're feeling that research, like the 2C slide. If you still need help, please click right here. We got librarians on the spot to get you there. Hati Trust, worth your time. Then you're feeling that research, like the 2C slide. If you still need help, please click right here. We got librarians on the spot to get you there.
All right, thank you. And as you can see there, we were really focusing on making sure that people understood when they connected to chat, they're talking to a person, they're not talking to a bot. And as we were talking about, as Tali was talking, I was thinking, man, I should have showed the video that we did where we had one of our staff dress up as a robot, and we had a librarian chasing him around trying to get the bot not to interact with students. That one was funny too. I'll drop some links in the chat. I can see you asking about that. So assessment, this is the final thing. Let's not forget about this. And so this is, this is something to do before and after, right? And I'm not talking about just sort of pre and post test for individual events or classroom activities, but actual market research. Are there services out there that maybe we can provide that we're not providing? So asking people what it is they want, but also ensuring that we are giving people giving people the services we already know they need. One interesting thing, a focus group we did one year, this is a phrase that has really, really stuck with me ever since we did these focus groups. One instructor, as we were asking questions about what they do and don't know about the libraries, he said, I don't even know what I don't know. And that's something I kind of keep in mind every time I'm thinking about, coming up with a campaign or, just communicating with people. So I will leave that here for now. And I think this is time for questions.
Thank you so much, Robin, Talia, and Fiona. That was brilliant. So now we're in our roundtable discussion portion of the webinar. So I just wanted to ask you, Robin, actually. So have you found that there's been a shift in how students are discovering the library in the present day compared to maybe a few years ago?
That's interesting, and I'm not. I don't know that I have a good answer for this, because I think also you first you have to think what do we mean by discover. I think is Tali's showing how that you can embed services and things like JSTOR, and even in some things we do on campus at UT is embedded in Canvas, which is our the software that students use there's a name for that kind of software and I can't think of it off the top of my head. Blackboard, Canvas,
learning management systems.
Learning management systems. Thank you, Talia. My brain left me for a moment. So I think that because of the shifts in technology, there are different ways that people are discovering the library. And I know that at UT's campus, if you've never been to Knoxville is sort of right near the Great Smoky Mountains, and it's a very hilly campus. So where the library is situated is sort of at the center of campus in one of the flatter areas. So I think the building gets a lot of traffic, partly because we have a lot of cool stuff in the library, but partly because it's a good place to rest in between destinations. So that's not really a good answer, I don't think, but I don't know that provides any real insight, but that's what I have for today.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. And I mean, our next question is for everyone. So can you share some real examples of how libraries are using marketing and outreach techniques in interesting ways? So who wants to volunteer to answer that one first?
I can go first if the others don't mind. We have libraries that use Lean Library to inject library services, obviously, at the point of need, and highlight them to patrons. They use things like assist messages that provide a non-intrusive pop-up of advice on specific pages, and our LibGuides integration, which Talia mentioned earlier, of course, which obviously places iframe LibGuides on any page at all. And we've seen libraries place them on ChatGPT, other AI tools, Google Scholar, Wikipedia, any website. So it's about highlighting existing library content, basically, content that's already been created. And we've also seen, I know I mentioned TikTok earlier, but we've seen quite a few libraries set up TikTok accounts. But to save kind of librarian time, they use student ambassadors to create the content as well, which is quite a handy tactic, I think. And students are always more likely to listen to their peers and other students probably than librarians and lecturers. So I think that works really nicely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Fiona. Talia or Robin, do you have anything to add to this question?
I don't actually. I was thinking about this last night. A lot of the I'll add a comment. A lot of the really innovative uses that I've seen of like marketing techniques have interestingly been coming from the public library sector. I feel like they have to spend a significant more time on marketing and outreach because they don't have a built-in audience like academic librarians do. And I often wondered, as a former academic librarian, I wonder if that mindset that, that libraries are kind of a given on a campus and are protected kind of under accreditation terms, that is holding, is that something that is holding us back from thinking creatively and almost aggressively to kind of put the library in front of the students, kind of what public libraries are really at the forefront of doing.
Fantastic, thank you, Talia. That's a really interesting point about what school librarians are doing. Robin, just want to ask if you've got any comments or thoughts about this question.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything particularly interesting to add. I see a lot of people trying new things out there, and I think that's the important thing to do. Is be creative and as Talia was saying, let's just not take our situation for granted, because all of that, so much could change. You just have no idea.
That's a really great point. Thank you so much. So I've got a question for Fiona. So what does the research in Librarian Futures reports that you kindly shared earlier, so what does the research tell us about the level of support students would like to receive from their library?
I think our research tells us that students mostly crave library guidance, like Talia was saying. So they actually really crave that guidance from librarians, especially now, as with the stress levels and everything, the landscape changing so quickly. They do want support. They value their library, but they just prefer that support when and where they need it, rather than it, appearing at irrelevant times or kind of having to hunt it out. They also mostly wish for support in literature search, but also research methods, AI guidance, and help when publishing their work, and other areas came in as key areas too. And in our initial survey, they were also highly receptive to the idea of having, an app for their library that sat on their browser, showing that they have like a genuine interest in receiving library support, and they wouldn't find it intrusive. Yeah, the need is definitely there, and they would like that support.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So I've got another question which is open to the panel. What do library users expect today from the library? Today from the university and from the library?
If I could jump in. So one of the things that I've seen is library users and just students in general at the university, they kind of expect almost a commercial experience because that's what they get everywhere else in the entire world. And yes, libraries are different and they're not for-profit institutions, but when you're accustomed to this experience, it's hard to then change your mindset that you're not going to get that experience in this one very maybe particular setting, right? So they expect customization, they expect personalization, they want to book a library space, just like they want to book a movie seat at, when they go to the cinema. Can you imagine going back to that where you just showed up at the day and just pick a seat at the theater? Like, can you imagine going back to that? They want to get emails from the library of, you read this book, maybe you'll like these other books. They get that from Amazon. They get that from Barnes and Nobles. They get that from every other bookstore. I know there's privacy implications here. Those could be definitely addressed and mitigated, but that's the experience they're expecting. And Robin mentioned it. In almost every experience in the modern world, information comes to users at an annoyingly, alarmingly high rate. She mentioned the amount of emails that people get. For those of you in the US, I think this past week, how many text messages and emails did you get about voting in just the last 72 hours, maybe? And those text messages weren't just like, hey, go vote, right? It was where to vote. Make sure you're registered. Click this link to check your polling place. Click this link to check your map. Check this, it was information coming to you that you didn't have to do anything to get that information. So when you're thinking about that's the experience people are used to getting, especially the 18 to 20 some demographic, information comes to them. Thinking about how you can then pivot that and go, how do we get information to them rather than them just waiting for them to come to us when they need us?
Was going to say literally exactly the same point as Talia, which is that most students are just used to a seamless online experience, and so they expect that from their university services and their library services as well. And we had a really interesting stat come up in one of our reports, which was that students will spend at most under 15 to 30 minutes searching for any resource before they give up. Like they just, they won't spend longer than that. They'll just give up. So they do want those to be available to them. They don't want to have to look for them and hunt them out. So yeah, I think that's definitely a really important point.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to an experiment we did when I was at the libraries at Texas A&M, where we did when does everybody remember when Foursquare was a thing? Is Foursquare still a thing? I don't. Anyway, but it was this, you could sort of check in at places, and you can still do that on other social media, but what we did was we started highlighting through the library's Foursquare account. If people were to check in at, say, the journalism building, we would highlight collections that we had that were, sort of related to journalism. So again, it's, at that point of need, point of, they're already interacting with something that's similar to this. Like, let's give them a heads up or a hand up, if you will. And yeah, the thing I try to keep in mind too is maybe it was Talia and Fiona, I can't remember which one of you used the phrase digital native. Digital native does not mean information literate. So just because they're on every social platform out there does not mean they know how to filter all of that content that's coming at them. So yeah, I think maybe I'll just leave it there. That's why they need us, whether they know it or not.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, because if anything, they're getting so much more information than historically, where people are just overloaded, aren't they, of information because of social media and everything online. So they need that guidance even more. Yeah.
That was brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, such amazing answers. I've got a question for Talia. So I know you've come from a librarian background, and now you work in marketing at Springshire. What do you notice about maybe how the state of library marketing has changed, or maybe the struggles of libraries?
Such a good question. So back when I was a librarian, feels a long time ago, but it was at that time, it was really revolutionary to focus on content creation that met the needs of users. And probably right now you're like thinking to yourself, like, duh, of course. But at the time, it was a really big kerfluffle, like really big. I remember I presented at a conference about creating course guides, not even class guides, course guides. And I think I almost caused a riot in the audience because I was talking about how they did better than, say, generic subject guides, right? So making a course guide on English Composition 101 versus just a generic subject guide on English. And that was just a huge mindset change. So at that time, it was all about creating content and offering services that users wanted. So at that time, it was all about like chat reference, getting them to chat with us. Text message reference was like brand new at that time. And it's like, oh my God, they can text the librarian. That's so cool. The change that I am seeing from that to now is getting the librarian in front of the patron. So you're creating the tailored content, you're creating and offering tailored services, but how do you get it in front of them, right? How do you put it in a place where they're going to see you? Fiona shared that stat from the Futures Report that, what is it, 74% start their research outside of the library website. So I mean, that number alone tells you that you're only getting 24% of users that even come to the library website, but they still need you, right? They still need you. So thinking about how to put the library in front of the patron's eyes, really, no matter where they are, wherever they start their search, getting you to kind of display on that. And the thing that that I love the most about our integration point is the chat reference and being able to chat with a librarian when you're on any web page. Like, can you imagine I'm on Chat GPT, I'm trying to put in prompts to help me narrow my research papers, thematic points, and come up with, a statement, a research statement. I don't know how to use this. I'm not doing it right. I need help. I'm already at my 15-minute mark and I'm ready to get out of here. Bloop, bloop, librarian chat pops up and I can talk to you, a real person, and you can help me. And I didn't have to go find you. I didn't have to go hunt for you or search for you. You were, you're a trusted source. The librarian capital is really, really high. Like when people rate librarians as far as being a trusted source, the numbers are really, really high. So how do you leverage that capital? How do you leverage that you're a trusted source? You're a helpful source. There's no judgment going to be coming from you, so they can come to you and be like, I'm on ChatGPT, can you please help? And they're not going to get yelled at, right? So how do you leverage that in this kind of modern day and age? That I think is the new challenge. That I think is where I see modern libraries really kind of being successful.
Thank you so much, Talia. So we have our final question now for the roundtable discussion. So, and I think someone did ask a bit of a similar question in the Q&A as well. So, like the role of academic librarians is always changing. You know, and so many different demands. Now academic librarians need to keep up with the digital shifts and risks and opportunities posed by Gen AI. So how can librarians also find the time to be marketeers and promote the library's visibility? So yeah, I don't know who wants to kick off this one.
I can kick off, or Robin. Yeah, whoever wants to.
Either way. You
Go
go
ahead.
first.
Okay. I was just saying, I think it's just about capitalizing on what you've already created, which I know Talia's brought that point up. There are certain things that librarians might already do, like already sending regular email comms, for example, and it might be just adjusting the messaging or changing the scheduling for certain demographics. Or if you do use a tool such as Lean Library, that's surfacing obviously your existing content. You might have created hundreds of LibGuides and support material already, and it's just not being seen. And so obviously by surfacing them where patrons need them, you're already making use of all that stuff you've already created, and you're not having to create a lot of extra resources. And I know the LibGuide stat was really good from Utah State, wasn't it, Talia? It's like just by highlighting their existing LibGuides that they'd already created, one of them increased by 450%, which is really impressive. Yeah, was it content is king and distribution is queen? Yeah.
I would say too, the as Fiona said, capitalize on what you've already created, but I'll go back to a point I made about capitalize on what other people have already created. There are newsletters out there on campus already, and so get in those, work with the communication people in departments, with university marketing and communications where you can. Look around at cultural institutions in your community. What things you be able to do with a historical society who's already got their own audience, to promote collections that you have. I think maybe that's, because it's hard because, library school doesn't teach you marketing. So literally everybody out here who's trying to do it is, well, I won't say everybody, some of you might have marketing degrees, but a lot of us are out there making it up as we go along. And of course we know how to find the resources because we are librarians, but it's not easy. So I think, lean on your library community as much as you can, your colleagues at other institutions.
I had one thing I wanted to add here. So have you all seen that it's pretty old now, but it's this hilarious Reddit thread where somebody says, I have an idea about a book sharing club where everybody gets together and you share books and it doesn't cost you any money, and we lend books to each other. And the response to that was, you've just invented the library, right? Like you've just invented the library that's been around forever. And we all laugh, and that's really funny. And maybe we kindly mock that person. But the reality is, and truthfully, that person's library failed them, right? That person's library they failed in communicating their value, their content, and their services, because this was a concept that person had never even thought of or heard of or knew about, right? So Fiona said, reiterated my point earlier about content is king and distribution is queen, and she wears the pants. I think that for academic librarians to keep up with the digital shift and make sure that they are, promoting the library's visibility, it's you got to focus a little bit more on distribution and not so much on content. I would say it's probably maybe 80% content and 20% distribution in academic libraries. And that's great. It's important, this age of misinformation. It's important to take time to create, curate, and build content and collections in a super mindful way. But I'd like to see academic libraries spending more time on distribution, making use of traditional time-proven marketing techniques that have been around for decades, and thinking about how to put the library more in front of the user. I go to lots of conferences. This year alone, I went to 16 or 17. And I ask academic libraries all the time, do you use email marketing? Like, do you send emails to your users based upon, who they are? And I don't think I've met a single academic librarian who said yes. And email marketing has been around since what? The 90s? This is a time-proven technique, and we're still not even there yet, right, for academic libraries. So that's what I would say.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much. I'm really sorry we are at time now. I've answered a few of the questions throughout, and I think there was one that we did answer live, all about capacity and how to manage time. There's a few questions about social media, like which content performs better. But as Fiona said earlier, this is the first in a series, so we will have a second webinar focused on, specifically on social media and different channels, where we hope to answer all of those questions there. So yeah, stay tuned for that one, which will be in the new year. But yeah, thank you all so much to our panel, to Robin, Charlie, Fiona. It's been so insightful. It's been really good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.